So we're on location with Jesus. We've come to be where Jesus was so that we can learn about how to live with Jesus where we are. We're in school with his disciples, because that's what a disciple is really. A disciple is just a learner or an apprentice, and Jesus is our master teacher. And one day, right here in this place, this is called Caesarea Philippi, Jesus, who whatever else you might think about him was clearly a remarkable teacher, decided to give his disciples, his students, a pop quiz. Anybody remember pop quizzes? Anybody like them? My favorite pop quiz story was from a class on ornithology, the study of birds. Students come in and the teacher says, pop quiz, and they have to identify 25 species of birds, but the killer is, all they have to go on is pictures of the birds' feet. He says, you gotta be able to identify these birds by their feet. And one student flips out, this is impossible, this is crazy, nobody could know this, I'm leaving, I'm walking out. Teacher says, you can't or you'll flunk. Kids, I don't care, flunk me. Teacher says, all right, you flunk, what's your name? And the student rolls up his pants to his knees and says, you tell me. Those are pop quizzes. Nobody likes them much, but they don't just come in school. You've had them since. We have them all the time. The woman you're seeing turns to you and says, where do you see this relationship headed? That's kind of a pop quiz. You're in the elevator with your company's very intense CEO. What are you working on today? That's kind of a pop quiz. A policeman pulls your car over. Do you know how fast you were going? IRS asks you, how much money did you make last year? Somebody says, you want to hear a little interesting gossip? See, pop quizzes go on all the time. And I think maybe pop quizzes are kind of a gift from God because they help us come to grips with what we're really thinking and really doing. And a lot of times we hide that from ourselves. Now, Jesus' most famous pop quiz consists of really just one question. Who do you say that I am? And again, whatever you think about Jesus, it's remarkable that people are still wrestling with that question. Every year at Easter, there will be major stories in media all around the world just around that one question. And it makes me wonder a lot, if we're together and we're not in a church setting, if there's no pressure to give the right answer, what would everybody say to that one? What would you say? I wonder about this because a lot of people think that Christians are folks who give what they think is the right answer to that question, and non-Christians are people who give what Christians think is the wrong answer to that question. That's how they define what it means to be a Christian. But as it turns out, Jesus himself didn't approach faith that way. Now, what you think about Jesus matters immensely, but not for the reason a lot of people think. God's main goal for you, and the way that you get into an intimate relationship with God, is not actually that you can give the right answer. It's something way deeper. And that something is part of what we've come to Caesarea Philippi to learn about. Now, the setting for this pop quiz is incredibly important. I think it's going to open up this story a ton. So we're going to talk about where we are for a moment. Caesarea Philippi is on the northernmost border of Israel. In Jesus' day, it was under the authority of Herod Philip. And here's why that matters. Mostly, Jesus did his ministry in Galilee, which was under the authority of another guy named Herod Agrippa. Herod Agrippa was the guy who killed John the Baptist and wanted to kill his cousin Jesus. Herod Agrippa actually seduced the wife of his brother, Herod Philip, and married her. So he married his sister-in-law. They were both sons of Herod the Great, and this wife was actually a granddaughter of Herod the Great. Her name was Herodias. Herod the Great essentially named everybody after himself. He was not a guy with a small ego. And John the Baptist said to Herod Agrippa, you know, you really should not seduce your brother's wife, especially when she's also your niece. Not a good idea. That's part of why Herod Agrippa had John the Baptist's head sliced off, and also why he was after Jesus. It was really just a giant ancient reality show, The Real Housewives of Herod the Great. Now, automatically, anybody who Herod Agrippa didn't like, Herod Philip liked, because he couldn't stand Herod Agrippa and what he'd done to him. So this region was actually a safe place for Jesus. He wasn't being hunted here. He wasn't in as much danger here. So this is a really good place to come and get some rest and some relaxation and have kind of a reflective conversation, have a little teaching session with his disciples. But there's more going on, way more. The reason there was a city here at all is that right behind me, There's a cave, and in the ancient world, it had a vast amount of water running out of it. In ancient times, we're told by the historian Josephus, who lived about when Jesus did, that there was so much water gushing out of this cave, they could not actually measure the depth of the pool. In the ancient world, where water was sacred, especially around here where it was so dry, this quite naturally became a center for religious shrines. And centuries before Jesus, this became a place where the god Baal was worshipped. You might have heard of him in the Old Testament. There are actually remains of at least 14 temples devoted to Baal right around here. Baal was a kind of fertility god whose worship included both cultic prostitution and human sacrifice. So let me say a little bit more about Baal. Part of why this shrine was here is because we're at the lowest elevation right now of Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon was the highest mountain in Israel, and it was associated with Baal. Because it was so high, it's over 9,000 feet high, it would get like 60 inches of rainfall a year. And in Israel, in the ancient world, rainfall meant that crops could be grown, and that meant food, and food meant money. So Baal was also kind of the god of money. And all of this involved the fertility of the earth. And so in the ancient world, they thought, well, if the gods are fertile, the earth would be fertile. So part of Baal's job, weird as it sounds to us, was he was supposed to impregnate a goddess named Asherah. There's talk about Asherah poles in ancient Israel. So he was the god of fertility, and that's where the sexual stuff came in. So he's the god of sex. And where there's money and sex, there's always power. And so he was called the rider of the clouds, and he spoke with thunder. The power of thunder was his voice. And that means that essentially in the worship of Baal, people were worshiping money, sex, and power. What a weird day that people would live where they would actually idolize money and sex and power, saying, I want to give my life to the accumulation of more money, more sexual pleasure, and more power. Who would ever do that? What dummies were they? Well, then after Baal, this area was associated next with the Greek god Pan. And its old name actually was Panion, from the Greek god Pan. The story was that Pan was born in precisely that cave. And it was said that he was half human and half goat, kind of a disgusting combination. And his mother was so revolted by him when he was born that she abandoned him, kind of a nasty thing to do. So he was associated with chaos and disorder. And he would throw your enemies into panic. That's where we get that word, panic. And he would create pandemonium. That's where we get that word, a spirit or a demon of chaos. And he would inspire pancakes, cakes with all the height and goodness flattened out of them. Actually, that one's not true, but the other ones are. You can still see niches on the wall here where there were statues to pagan idols, Hermes and Echo. And there's a sign just a few feet from where I'm standing that describes how sacrifices were sent to the realm of the dead. In Greek thought that was called Hades. And there was this belief that this was kind of the entrance to the underworld, this strange spring of water coming up out of the earth. And so it may well have been known as the gates of Hades. All that involves not just Baal, but the god Pan. Now, later on, this city was given by Caesar to Herod Philip. And Herod built a giant white temple for emperor worship. And he named the city Caesarea Philippi, Caesarea to honor Caesar, and Philippi to honor Philip. That was him. Now, in addition to that, this spring was believed maybe to be the primary source of the River Jordan, and the River Jordan was the most important river in Israel. That was the river that God parted for Joshua and the Israelites to go into the Promised Land. That was the river where John the Baptist baptized Jesus. So they had all kinds of sacred significance for the people of Israel. This one place, so many streams are converging here. That's why Jesus comes to have this conversation. Because people have always wanted to know, what's our story? Is there a God? Is there any force behind reality? And if there is, who is this God? Could we know him? What does he want? How could we please him? Why are we here? What's the explanation for us? Where are we headed? What's our destiny? Jesus brings his disciples right here. Maybe they're looking at that cave together. And it's almost kind of like Jesus is saying, now I want you to consider all the claims of all the powers and all the religions that people have ever explored. You know, people that go after Baal, people that spend their whole life devoting themselves to more money or more sexual pleasure, or I want to have more power, or Pan, Greece culture, all of that, or Caesar, all the human powers, the CEOs, you know, whatever the big chair is to sit in, or Israel, all of the laws. I want you to think about all of that stuff very fairly, very openly. And then he starts with a safe question. Back to the text. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am? Who do people say the Son of Man is?" In other words, what are the other kids saying? And the disciples are all over this question. Some say you're John the Baptist, some say Elijah or Jeremiah or another prophet. Israel was hoping, aching, that God would send one of their heroes back to them. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say I am? And I just want to pause here for a moment, because that's the great question of the ages. And all of us will respond to that one. What would you say? Now, for the disciples, this is kind of like the final question on Jeopardy, and they're all looking at their feet. Everybody had an answer to the first question. They replied. Not so much this time. This is a little more personal. Only one responds. And you might guess who. It's Simon Peter. Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the God who is alive." Jesus, right here in this spot, said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Oh my gosh, imagine how Peter felt. I just got an A. Any of you other guys want a little tutoring on this discipleship thing? I am available after class. So let's pause here, because there's a lot going on. Who do you think I am? Now, why does Jesus ask the disciples who they think he is? Well, it's because he wants to know who they think he is. It's not a hard question, really. But what that means is they haven't told him who they think he is. They've been fuzzy about who they think he is. In fact, they've had hundreds of conversations with Jesus by now about God, life, love, the kingdom, faith, how to live, the law. But they've never had a conversation about his identity, on their understanding of who he is. This is very significant. At the beginning of their relationship, Jesus did not say, "Oh, I believe the right things about me, and then you can be my disciples." What he said is, "Follow me. Just follow me. Only follow me, and you will be my disciples." In other words, if you choose to follow me, eventually you will come to know me. If you do not choose to follow me, if you choose not to, it doesn't really matter what you say you believe about me. Guys, what matters most to Jesus is not that I'm a believer about him, it's that I'm a follower of him. And here's what's so interesting, and here's why this is so important to get this right. A lot of people outside the church, even inside the church, have this idea about Christianity, about Jesus. I kind of had it too when I was growing up. I grew up in a church where the idea kind of was that first you got to believe the right thing about Jesus. You got to believe he was divine. You got to affirm some other things. And then you're a Christian. That means you're going to go to heaven when you die. They have to let you in. And then if you're kind of a spiritual overachiever, you might take discipleship seriously, and you might want to do a little extra credit work, and you might want to try following Jesus, but you don't really have to if you don't want to. The main thing is you just believe the right stuff. But wherever that idea came from, it didn't come from Jesus. He did not teach that. He didn't go around to people initially and say, "Believe the right stuff about me, and then eventually you might want to follow me for extra credit." He just said, "Follow me. This is the greatest offer ever extended to the human race. And if you do, eventually, you'll come to believe the right stuff. You'll just get it. You'll just see it." Now, anybody listening to me, here's where this is good news for you. Because I know for a lot of people, because we live in an age of doubt, folks wrestle with doubt in our day, and a lot of people are going to be thinking right now, honestly, In my private moments, I'm not sure what I think about Jesus. I'm not sure that I actually believe the divinity stuff, the Son of God stuff. And I'm afraid that means I'm out. I'm afraid that means church is out for me, that, faith is out for me. And I want to say to you right now, not at all. I want to say to you, you should never try to make yourself believe anything. Belief is not the kind of thing that you can make yourself do. Belief is not at the mercy of our willpower. What I want to say to you is, you're in precisely the same position that the disciples were in. You could follow him right now, even if you're a little fuzzy on some other stuff, because Jesus is not trying to create just believers. He is trying to create children of light. We'll come back to that. Now, what is Peter saying? He says, you are the Christ. Some people think that Christ is Jesus' last name, like he's from the Christ family and his dad was Mr. Christ and his mom was Mrs. Christ. It's actually not the way that it works at all. Christ was the Greek word for the Messiah. It was from the word to anoint, the anointed one. That was the king. In other words, you're the king that we've been waiting for. You're the son of the God who's alive. There were lots of other gods just look around the grotto. They had lots of sons just look around the grotto. None of them was actually alive. Now, there was still an awful lot Peter didn't understand. You and me too. Here's what Peter did understand. Jesus, somehow, you're it. You're the one the world has been waiting for. You're the one my heart's been aching for, beating for, that I've been longing for, that I've been hoping for, when I was afraid, when I was alone, when I was discouraged, when I was guilty, when I knew I couldn't fix myself and nobody else could, and I didn't know that anybody else would ever come along, when I wondered, does anybody really know what's true and what matters, and can anybody actually live this stuff? You are why there is this dream of a once and future king that just won't go away. You're the one, and somehow, see, that's him, that's Jesus. And the light has come. The light has dawned. There's a wonderful translation of this passage in a really cool version of the New Testament. It's the Hawaiian Pidgin version. And it goes like this. Simon Peter say, you the Christ guy, the special guy God would send, the God who alive for real kind, you his boy, you his boy. That's what Simon says. And it's so interesting. Jesus doesn't say, Simon, you're right. He says, Simon, you're blessed. That's a very interesting response. Usually in school, if you get the right answer, the teacher doesn't say, blessed are you, Mary. Blessed are you, Danny. The teacher just says, yep, you're right. Blessed is a real important Jesus word. He uses it in his most famous talk at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The blessed people are not just people who get the answers right. The blessed people are people for whom the kingdom of God, that is life in the reality of God's presence and God's power and God's forgiveness and God's strength and God's guidance and God's grace and God's love, is now available actually to you in this moment, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you've done through Jesus. Blessed are you. And the reason knowing what Peter knows about Jesus matters so much is you don't have to wonder anymore if what Jesus says is true. You don't have to wonder anymore whether or not you're going to be okay. You can live together with your friend Jesus in growing confidence and trust and light in his kingdom. In Greek, the word for Peter, Petros, actually means rock. Jesus is saying, now you're no longer unstable, impulsive Simon. You're rocky now. And there's another little lesson around this. New Testament scholar writes about the limestone that is here, Xenomanian limestone, was actually the hardest kind of limestone in Israel. It was considered the best for building purposes and for water transportation and for the formation of soil. And so it's like life-giving stuff. It's the best stuff. And Jesus is saying now, you're going to be a life-giving person. You got a new identity. You're this rock, and you have a new authority. Here's the keys. I got them from my dad. You can go right on into the kingdom anytime you want, and you can help other people go into it. You have now a new mission, and you have a new assurance. The gates of Hades will not prevail. They're right over there. You're looking at them. People have been sacrificed to them. Death has been reigning for the longest time, so I'm going into them. I'm going to the realm of the dead, but I'm coming back. You don't even have to be afraid of dying anymore. And you'd think that'd be the end of the story, but it's not. This is a quiz with two parts. With Jesus, the quiz always has two parts. So fascinating. From that time on, from this moment of amazing revelation and glory, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed. Now, this is very strange. This is not in the script. None of the other gods, Baal or Pan or Caesar, none of them said anything like this. They're very confused by this. And again, he begins to teach them about this precisely when they finally see his greatness. And so Peter decides to say something more. Peter basically says to the other disciples, hey boys, I got this. I just got an A in Messiahology. I'll straighten this out. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke Jesus. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Such an amazing scene. He takes Jesus aside. Look, Jesus, I don't want to embarrass you in front of the fellas, but you got to stop this negative thinking. You know, it's just not inspiring. It's not motivational. The guys in the group are going to get discouraged. You know, I didn't become like the head of the church, the Pope, for this one. Our side's going to win. Their side's going to lose. What are you talking about dying? Jesus turned and said to Peter, the guy that he just renamed the rock, gave the keys to the kingdom, and he says, get behind me, Satan. You're a big problem to me because you are not gripped by the concerns of God, but by the concerns, the ways of thinking and valuing and attitudes of human beings. And I imagine Peter thinking, you know, I like that other nickname better. I like that Rocky nickname a lot better. Could we stay with that one? The Satan thing really doesn't do a lot for me. See, Peter's head's got to be spinning by now. You know, Jesus has just said, you're my rock. I'm going to build my church on you. And now he says, you're Satan. Get behind me. And again, there's amazing teaching in this. Jesus' main vehicle on earth is going to be the church. Jesus' main problem on earth is going to be the church. And I experienced this, and so do you. One moment, like I'm listening to God, I'm getting that right, I'm rock solid. And then, like, the evil one is at work in me. Here's the thing. You can get the right answers and still become the wrong person. And Jesus' own brother James wrote about this. You believe that there is one God? Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. It's about way more than saying I believe the right thing. So Jesus has this very dramatic encounter with Peter. Then he turns to his disciples. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for me will find it. Baal never said that. Pan never said that. Caesar never said that. Money, sex, and power never said that to you. They never asked you to lay your life down. They never went to a cross for you. See, Jesus is not building a people whose main goal, whose main identity is that they give right religious answers. In fact, those are the people who are going to kill him. He doesn't want answer givers. He wants life givers. People that will give their life to God and to others in love and humility. Do you understand, guys, This is precisely the moment that the prophet Isaiah had spoken about centuries earlier. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the people, and that's just true in this part of the world, and in every part of the world. And in my heart, there's darkness. But the Lord has come upon you, and His glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Then you will look and be radiant. Arise, awaken, and shine. How do we do that? So I want to pause here for a moment. What does it look like to be a child of the light? I think of a friend of mine who could be making piles of money. Not that there's anything wrong with that. God calls some people to that. Maybe you're a money pile maker. Man, go to it. Give it, tithe it. But she said, there's a little group of kids that I know, and they need to learn how to read, and they're on a track where they're not going to be able to. And so she's devoting herself to helping create a place, a library, and then get all kinds of books. And I was there a while ago and read to some of those kids, and to see their face shine when they pull a book and they think, this is our place, we get to read too. That's a child of light. When I first came to the church where I served, there was a woman named Opal. She was in her 90s, super gracious person, just loved Jesus. And after every week, no matter how bad the sermon was, she would come to encourage me. It's a hard thing to encourage a preacher. I had a friend say to me quite recently, hey, John, your sermons are getting better. I'm not sure exactly how to take that, but with Opal, every time she saw me, there would be some kind of reality-based encouragement. And she lived with this joy. And she died quite recently. Frank Vanderswan from our staff did her service. 103 years old, hardly anybody left from her world, but she told Frank, I want it to be a moment of joy. And so when we have my service, I want us to sing two songs. I think one of them was America the Beautiful, and the other one of all songs was Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. And so that's what they sang. 103 years of life and this enormous joy. I think of a man from our church who came up to me and handed me this little medallion, and it was 35 years of sobriety. That's a child of light. How different his kids' lives are because he did that. I was at a party not too long ago, and there were a lot of kind of mover and shaker types, and there was this guy who could have been doing a lot of great networking, but there was a man at the party who had Parkinson's. It was quite difficult to be able to communicate with him. And I saw this guy, could have been talking to anybody, on his knees, talking to this guy that everybody else was kind of ignoring. And no kidding, he had this smile on his face. He was just beaming. That's a child of light. I'm in this place, Caesarea Philippi, this amazing site. People come here from all over the world. And they say a lot of words I don't understand. Two sounds I understand. One is a lot of laughter here. And the other is groups would come and they would sing. And often the word that they would sing that I know is Alleluia. It's a real old word. And the word Alleluia is quite ancient. It just meant praise. And it would be sung to Baal or to Pan or to Caesar. But Yah, that's from Yahweh. That's the God who wants to be known. That's Yeshua. Yahweh saves. Alleluia. You are the light of the world. Let your light so shine before people that they see your good deeds and glorify your Father who is in heaven. We're in school to become children of light. And my goal is not to do that by trying harder to do good things, but through being open to the Holy Spirit, through wise use of spiritual practices, making space for God to interrupt my normally darkened pattern of thoughts and desires, and kind of trade them in, kind of exchange them for truth-filled thoughts and noble desires. Through relationships with people inside Jesus' community and people outside, I seek to become a child of light. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of the light. For the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. Last pop quiz. On the night before Jesus died, he gathers his disciples for one last supper. And the final question is, who's the foot washer going to be? This is a real humble thing. There's no record of any rabbi ever doing this for his disciples. They all kind of wonder who's going to get stuck with that job. Jesus stands up, takes a towel, takes a basin. It's me. In the kingdom of God, among the children of light, greatness isn't about money, sex, and power. Baal didn't know, Pan didn't know, Caesar didn't know. It's servanthood. So guys, take off your sandals. And then he looks down. There's John's feet. And there's Andrew's feet. I recognize them. Simon Peter, there's your feet. I don't know those big old clodhoppers anywhere. I know you. I know you by your feet.